Adult Ballet Studio is a podcast featuring conversations with the empowering voices of the adult ballet community, a world where passion has no limits and dreams can take flight. My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm an adult ballet dancer and your host. Welcome to the studio. Happy Tuesday and welcome back to the Adult Ballet Studio. I'm your host, Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm very excited to be talking to the guest who's in the studio this month. Since I started this podcast just a few months ago, I've already gotten several messages and emails asking for this person to come on, and your wish is my command, you guys. Today, I'm talking to someone who's very loved in the adult ballet community, Julie Leung, founder of Broche Ballet. You might know her as Julie Gill, but she recently got married this summer. We talk about that and all about how she walked down the aisle in sparkly point shoes. Julie describes herself on the Broche Ballet website, brocheballetonline.com, as a formerly clumsy and inflexible teen who took her first ballet class at 17. Through 15 years of training, she's now helping hundreds of adult ballet dancers become the dancer of their dreams. She opened Broche Ballet in 2017 and branded it as Ballet for Grown-Ups. It eventually grew to 3 studio locations in Denver by 2020. While COVID closed the studio's Denver operations permanently, Broche Ballet is now thriving as a fully online program offering classes and resources to help adult dancers fulfill their potential. The virtual studio is also gearing up to host its 3rd International Adult Ballet Festival, held each year in person in Miami as a ballet intensive, showcase, and competition for adult dancers. Julie said she started this in 2022 as a way to give adult dancers more performance opportunities and has been so moved watching it grow. She also hosts a podcast, Broche Banter, that's available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and the Broche Ballet website, and has a YouTube channel, Ballet for Grown-Ups. As we talk about in this interview, there are a couple of other exciting things in the works for Broche Ballet as well. Is there anything Julie doesn't do? I wonder when she gets any sleep. But I'm so grateful for all of the work she's doing for the adult ballet community, and I was so honored to talk to her. Check out our conversation.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Great to see you this morning.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
I've listened to your podcast too, and obviously checked out all your YouTube videos. I'm a huge fan of the content that you're putting out there, so I'm really excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here and chat.
And I mean, first of all, you just got married this summer, right?
Yes, I did.
Oh, congratulations. That's exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.
Yeah, that's great. I was looking at some of the pictures. It looked like a beautiful day. And I noticed that you walked down the aisle in rhinestone point shoes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I love that. It's so great.
It was like a must-have in the big day. There weren't too many things that were like a must-have, but that for me was like definitely wanted to be a part of it because, ballet is just such a big part of my life and my who I am and what I enjoy doing, that I wanted it to be a part of that too. So it was really special that everybody humored me and enjoyed it with me.
No, that's amazing. It looked beautiful. And I love that you incorporated ballet into your wedding day. More people should be doing things like that, bringing their passions into their special day. So I think that's awesome. And you obviously own Broche Ballet. I know that everybody knows and loves your platform. I've had this podcast. We were just talking about how this podcast is brand new. I've only had it for a couple months, but I've already gotten so many requests to have you come on as a guest. They're like, when are you bringing Julie on? So I feel
oh my gosh.
Everybody loves you and loves your content so much. But for anyone who's listening who might not know, could you just give a brief overview of who you are and what Broche Ballet is all about?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm Julie and I run Broche Ballet, and we're all about giving adults the opportunity and the chance to become the dancer of their dreams. So whether that is technically or artistically or being able to perform or, being in front of the camera, whatever the opportunity is that the adults want and need out of ballet in their life, that is what we aim to provide people here at Broche. So whether you haven't ever danced before or you danced as a kid and you're trying to come back to it, we aim to give adults in ballet the same opportunities that kids would have in their training and in their performing, and really give them a chance to live that live the dancer life and get to really experience that on a very deep level. It's grown to be just a really great community of very passionate people who, maybe have a lot going on in their life, but they have this deep burning passion for ballet inside of them, and they just really can't live without it in their life. And so, whether they're practicing at home with me through my online program, or they're dancing with me in Miami in our International Adult Ballet Festival, or they're part of a couple of exciting projects launching soon. I'm not sure when this podcast is coming out, if they'll be out yet, but we're all about just giving people the chance to have ballet as like a really meaningful part of their life, because it's just such a deep rooted passion for so many of us.
I love that. What you're doing is so important. And, you're bringing opportunities to adults to do point classes, to do performance opportunities, and compete in your International Adult Ballet Festival, which I'm excited to talk about. And that's stuff that you don't see enough in the ballet community. There aren't that many opportunities for adults. So I just think it's so cool what you're doing. And I'm excited to dig into it. But before that, I was also excited because I was reading about your background. I'm a journalist, so I cover cybersecurity for my full-time job. And I read that you began your career in software development. Yes. And you eventually left your job to start Broche Ballet. So I was curious how that background sort of led you to starting your own studio. And I know that can always be risky to leave, one career path to pursue another. So how did you get the courage to do that and open the studio?
That was a very different time. That was a very different time in my life, but it's certainly how I started. So I studied computer science in college. The reason I studied it was because I had always had a dream to move to New York City. When I graduated high school, I had always wanted to go to New York City, and did not know at all how that was going to be possible. But nearing the end of high school, I received an invitation from a university in downtown Manhattan, Pace University, to be a part of their robotics computer science program, and went there in their summer program, and then received a scholarship to go there. And basically, as long as I studied computer science, I could live my dream of moving to Manhattan and live there. So I didn't have necessarily a passion for computer science, although I loved math and physics and kind of the, language and all these sort of really structural nitty-gritty things. So computer science wasn't totally out of left field, though it wouldn't necessarily have been what I picked if I had picked my major for a different reason, just had gone to a college in California, let's say, if I stayed there and picked a major based on my interests, I wouldn't necessarily have picked computer science. But when I got to New York City, obviously being in New York City was the main goal, and studying computer science was fine. And it was interesting. It was fine. It wasn't like I didn't like it or anything. It was quite interesting. And there was so much fun stuff to learn, and a really great base of education. I mean, granted, I did not only study computer science because there were so many fun classes you could take at the college. I also got a dance minor, and I got a math minor, and I got a digital art minor, and just took basically everything possible to take while I was there, because it wasn't really there for the computer science, although again, I liked it and I did well in it and enjoyed it and all of that stuff. When I graduated from college, I started my job as a software developer. I worked at a company called Street Easy, which is like Zillow, but for Manhattan apartments. Eventually we were bought by Zillow, which was really fun. We got to go to the NASDAQ and ring the bell, and it was like a really fun experience.
Cool.
To be up on the big Jumbotron in Times Square. That was like a total, New York experience.
That's like the dream.
Yeah, right. So did that for a while, and then transitioned to a company called SchoolKeep, which is a learning management system software. I think these days, a lot of people have heard of like Teachable or Kajabi. It's kind of like that, but for corporate businesses, and worked there as a software developer, but eventually turned into product manager, which is a little bit more like telling the software developers what they're going to be building and working with the customers to figure out what the software is going to need to do, what problems it's going to need to solve, and communicating that to the engineers. So I did that for a few years, and that was great education to learn how to run a business, to learn how to speak with customers, to learn how problems actually get solved. I got to work very closely with the sales team, the customer support team. I worked with everybody in the whole company, including the CEO. So I got to have a very wide range of education on how business works, and how a company is run. So that was about 3. The timeline's always shockingly fuzzy, given how not too just to know how fast that was, but I think that was for about 3 or 4 years of time in learning all of that. And then eventually, this is a long story long. Eventually I was taking private ballet lessons with a woman named Beth Kurtz, and she was she was my private teacher through when I was in New York City. She was great. And, it's hard to find teachers who kind of take adults super seriously and understand that you want to achieve at a high level, but maybe you don't want to be a professional dancer necessarily. Like you don't want to dance in a company as your full-time job, but you still want to be very good at it. It's hard to find people who understand that balance of desires, right? Like you don't need it to be your entire 100% life, but you want to be very good at it. And she like got it. She like got it on every level and pushed me really hard. And it was a huge reason for the foundation of technique that I got from her. And she, in one of our lessons, she slipped down the stairs and broke her tailbone. She was 79 and she couldn't teach. She couldn't teach. So she asked me to teach her students. She's like, can you teach my students? I'll teach you how to teach them. And that was, shocking because, I was still a student myself and it was very surprising, but, she and I had such a close relationship and she basically gave me about a 1.5 year long apprenticeship of how to teach adults, specifically on how to teach adults, how to help them, what they need to do for their bodies after work, how you get turnout to work for adult pelvis, like how you get everything to work in an adult body, because her students were mostly adults too. So I learned from her how to teach and did that on nights and weekends. I would go work full time, and then nights and weekends I would go into the studio and teach her students, and she would come watch and write to me and go back and forth and kind of help me learn how to do that. So that's how I started. That's how I started teaching. It was very much like a serendipitous type of a moment with a long-standing trusting relationship to help me get into it. Then, just life kind of continued and I ended up moving to Denver, and she passed away shortly after that. But I was like, well, I'm probably not going to do this anymore. Like, I'll just go back to my job. It was fine, like how, how necessary is this to continue? Like it's so much work to do this every, like you're working 40 hours a week and you're teaching 15 hours a week. And it's like, that's it, it obviously is quite a bit of time. But I couldn't stay away for too long. And in Denver, even pretty quickly found a place to open a studio. I just planned on continuing private coaching. I didn't plan on anything that I've made now necessarily. I just wanted to keep doing what I was doing in New York on nights and weekends. And the place that I had found was like cheap enough where I could pay for it with my full-time job. I could like pay for it. So even if I made no money, at least I'd have a studio to dance and I could, teach private lessons. And so I started that. I mean, it was still super scary. That was still the scariest decision I've made for my business, was that first one. The later ones, you kind of, you've done it before. It's not quite as scary. That first one was definitely the scariest though. I remember the landlord was pressuring me to make a decision on the space, like yes or no. And he texted me, he's like, I've got someone coming in at 9:30. So I need your answer by 9:30 because I have someone coming in at 9:30, and I texted him at like 9:29 and was like, okay, I'll do it. And like, just,
oh my
so it's like, it was so stressful. It was so stressful, even though like I had a job and I could have, but it was still very stressful and very scary to open the studio. It's like really cute now. Sometimes I go back and see all the like literal papers, like actual papers that I had handwritten on like my business plans and how much money I would need to make and how many students I would need to have to cover the rent and like worst case scenario, best case scenario. It was like, it's like really cute to go back now and look at all of that. So I don't know if it was courage as much as necessity, because the dream, the dream was in there, and that dream is bigger than the fear of doing it. And I think once that balance is right, then you can take the action because you have the passion and the dream and what you want. And that outweighs the fear of like, oh my gosh, this is pretty scary.
Yeah, it's always scary taking that first step, but I think you're so right. It's about that necessity, because when you have a dream, it's like you just have to do it no matter what, or else it's going to keep nagging away at you. So
not going away.
Yeah, exactly. I love your whole story. You sound a lot like me when I was in college, where I was just like, I love all these different things. I want to figure out how to do all of them. And you did. I mean, you were in New York studying ballet, you were studying teaching and also learning about business management. And that all sort of led you to Broche Ballet and opening your first studio in Denver, which is so cool. And I know the studio closed for a little bit during COVID. It's open back up now. Is that right, in Miami?
No. And no, I don't have a physical studio anymore. I did not reopen any physical studios. I only teach online from my home studio. So I teach now online on Zoom. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. So it's all
Yeah,
online. That's so
it's all
cool.
online. Yeah, I mean, other than the festival here in Miami, but throughout the year, it's online.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and I know you have 15,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel, Ballet for Grown-ups, and then you also have your own podcast, Broche Banter, where you bring on guests and you share tips from your own ballet journey and teaching. And I just think you have all these great resources, in addition to your online classes. We've talked before on this podcast a lot about how, adults, you have to sort of meet them where they are because they're in the middle of busy lives. And I think that you're just providing so much value to adults through all of these different mediums. If they can't always make it to the studio, they can take an online class or they can engage with some of your other content. So I was curious what value you're hoping to continue to bring to adult dancers through all of your different platforms.
I think one of the most interesting additional challenges that adults have is dealing with the doubts that they have around their ballet journeys. I think this is a big challenge that people have around making time for it, making ballet a priority, feeling like ballet is worth it to make it a priority. I think sometimes it's easier to just think, oh, I mean, my life is already so busy. Like, do I really need to take this time for myself? Like, it's so easy to push ballet to the back burner because it's like just for you. And encountering those doubts and encountering those obstacles, I think is one of the hardest things that adults have to deal with. Like, you have all of these things that are important. You have work and family and kids and your house and like everything you have to take care of and do. And so to set one of those aside and take time for yourself is super tough, especially when you're feeling discouraged, especially when the progress isn't coming easy, because we all hit plateaus and we all hit times where we went backwards or we get an injury and we have to rebuild from that. And when you're in already a little bit of a ballet trough and you have to choose it over something else that feels really important or maybe feels easier in the moment, that choice is so tough to keep choosing ballet over and over again, because as adults with a lifelong practice, you have to choose ballet like every day for your whole life. That's a lot of like choosing ballet over other stuff, right? That's a lot of times that you have to choose. So it's like, as adults, you're thinking about managing risk, like the risk of being embarrassed or failing, or the risk of being too tired for work the next day if you take that extra class, and you run the risk of all kinds of different things that people need to think about and balance. And you have to deal with prioritization, which is very painful. Prioritizing ballet over other things can be very painful for all kinds of reasons. If you prioritize it over work, if you prioritize it over anything else going on in your household, like managing your priorities is super tough as adults, right? Our life gets very complex, and ballet is very complex. So to stick that inside of a complex life, I think is another big challenge, in addition to obviously teaching and getting adult bodies to be able to do ballet, right? That's its own whole challenge of getting a fully formed body to accept ballet safely and progress safely and move through the technique. But then to get a complex art form to fit into a complex life is a very interesting challenge for adults to continue to solve. I mean, the passion is there. We all know ballet doesn't leave you alone. Once you've got it in there, like, it doesn't leave you alone. Even those times when life does take over and you take a little break, it's like, it's in there, right? It's like in there, and it's just like tapping you on the back of the brain. And it's like, hi, like, I'm still here. Like, I didn't forget. You can't ignore me. And so it's like that voice is going to keep coming back. And every time it comes back, then, we have that deep longing that sort of drives us back into the studio. And so I find that mental journey of ballet is almost just as important as the physical journey of ballet for learning ballet in adulthood and for having a lifelong practice, is just understanding yourself and what you need and why you're doing it and how it fits into everything else that is calling for your attention.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think that you have a lot of unique insight into this as well, because I was reading that you started ballet a little bit later when you were 17. That's when you took your first class. So I was wondering what that whole experience was like and how you first got introduced to ballet and kind of some of your own personal journey with it.
Yeah, so I started ballet at the end of high school. I studied music very intensely throughout high school, throughout my whole life until then. So I started piano at a very young age, like maybe 3 or 4. And then studied the flute and the euphonium and, marching band, and did the whole like super intense music thing. But by the end of high school, I was just pretty over it. I was pretty over it. I was like ready to move away and just like, start something new and start something fresh. And I was like looking for a new challenge and thinking, what's the hardest possible thing I could try? And I'm like, probably ballet, because I'm very clumsy and very inflexible. And have been sitting in a chair playing an instrument this whole time. So I don't know, moving wasn't my specialty. Movement wasn't my specialty, wasn't like naturally super flexible or coordinated necessarily. So ballet was like the hardest thing I could possibly think of to try. And, I'd been to the ballet before. My mom had taken me, and it was just so beautiful and so magical. And they had the best costumes. And although ice skaters have pretty great costumes, but ballet costumes are also pretty great. Yeah, the tutu is unmatched in in any other type. Yeah, so I at that point had a job and had a little bit of extra income as I was getting finished with high school, and just decided to start going to a ballet class on my way home from work, and walked in there, found like a leotard, tights, and ballet shoes. Didn't even know that generally adults wore skirts. I didn't even think of it. I just walked in with leotard, tights, and shoes, and I remember it was like in this attic, this teacher named Oscar, and I had no idea what was going on. Like I walked in there, I had never seen a ballet class before. I don't even know if like YouTube ballet classes were a thing yet. This was like, I don't know, 15 or 16 years ago. So it wasn't even like you were really Googling this stuff before you went to really get a ton of videos about it. So I walked in thinking maybe you would do what you saw on the stage. And then of course you're holding a bar, and there's like these things where you're pointing your foot to the front and the side and the back. And it was just like, okay. I mean, it was super fun. It was super great, but it was surprising to me what went on in ballet training, because it was like, this is so different than what I expected it to be.
Yeah.
But surprisingly super fun. And afterwards your brain feels super organized and you can't wait to go back again. And it was it was super fun. It was great. Basically my first class, I was like, I have no idea what this is, but like, I want more. This is great.
The bug had bitten you already. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was like immediate.
Yeah. I love that. I love that story because most people, I feel like, would sort of run screaming from the thing that might be the most difficult for them to try. At least I would. But you were like, no, what's the hardest thing I can possibly do? I'm going to face it head on. And I think that's so important, especially with something like ballet that can just feel so discouraging sometimes, to just keep having that courage or passion, or like you said, necessity, where you just have to keep going. And I know there's a question that comes up all the time, and I'm sure you're probably tired of answering it because I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but people are always asking, am I too old to start ballet? Or really, am I too anything to start ballet? Am I too inflexible? Or do I have the right body type, or whatever it is? So what would you normally say to people with those concerns about just sort of facing those fears and getting started?
Yeah, I think this fear comes from two places. Like number one, the fear of failure, like that I won't be able to do it, that I'll try it and I'll go there and I'll look stupid because everyone else is touching their toes and I'm the one who can't. And like, we've all seen like Lucille Ball, like I Love Lucy, she's trying ballet and everyone else is doing it beautifully. And she's like over there in the corner doing nothing correctly. And it's like, nobody wants to be that. No one wants to be like the butt of the joke, right? Like in class, no one wants to feel like that in class. And so I think that there's that fear of failure, that you're going to go there and just be like, either you have this imagination that everyone's going to be mean to you, or you're worried that you're going to be mean to yourself. You're worried that you will judge yourself and you'll think that you look silly and you'll feel silly and you'll feel clumsy and you'll feel awkward and you'll feel embarrassed. And there's that deep fear of those feelings and that experience, because it's so uncomfortable and it's so unpleasant, and you can literally avoid it by not doing ballet, right? You can literally not have those feelings by staying out of the studio, but then you have the longing feeling where you really want ballet. So you've got either one or the other, but that feeling like going in there, knowing that you might get embarrassed. And I always tell people on this side of it, like, there is no guarantee that you won't get embarrassed. There's no guarantee that you won't look silly. There's no guarantee that you won't feel clumsy. In fact, all of those things when you're starting something new will possibly happen. But then what? But then what do you want to do about it? Do you want to stop because of that? Or is it worth it to you to be able to look back in 5 years and say like, yeah, man, I did that. I stuck with it and I kept going because, in spite of all of that. So it's like, yeah, you're going to mess up and like, you're going to be on the wrong foot and you're going to be going left when everyone goes right. Those are probably going to happen. It's probably going to happen. Like, you're probably going to be less flexible than the people who've been there for 3 years working on their flexibility. But in 3 years, you'll be one of those people who's more flexible than the people coming in because you've been coming and working on it. So it's like, those fears are valid, and you might feel those difficult feelings in class, but then what? What do you want to do at that point when you're faced with that juncture? And I think the second part of this fear that people have is that you're not worth watching if you're not the best, that you might be like unpleasant to look at, or that you might be that someone won't want to watch you dance, or that you have nothing to share and nothing to offer if you're not, a 14-year-old Vaganova graduate who has legs up to their ears and is super thin and is the quote, the ballet stereotype that we see on the internet and that we see. It's like they believe that there's no value. There's no point. Nobody will want to watch it. They have nothing to share if they're not the best. And, I think this is not true. I don't think this is true at all. But that fear is real. And I always like to share this one performance that was so moving to me, the most moving performance, the most memorable performance I've ever seen. Okay, there's two most memorable performances. One was Jules from New York City Ballet, because the curtains open and the number of Jules that was on the stage was just like, I'd never seen anything like it. I've never seen so many jewels in one place. I don't even know who the dancers were who were wearing those costumes. It was completely irrelevant. The number of jewels that was on the stage was just incredible. I couldn't even handle it. So that was one. But the one relevant to this conversation, the most memorable actual dancing that I've ever seen, was this group of dancers who are they have Parkinson's disease. They're in their 70s and 80s, and they were dancing this piece about loss. They were dancing this piece about having lost their spouse, about having lost the person they spent their life with. And they couldn't do much. They had Parkinson's. They were mostly dancing from chairs. A couple of them could stand, but it wasn't like fancy dancing. It was very heartfelt. There was a chair in the front of the stage where their spouse would have been sitting, and they were dancing and sharing their love and sharing their experience. And that I cry usually when I share this story, because it was years ago. It still moves me so much to see how they shared that experience about dance and how much they could express through this movement and through this dance and through this music. And that, to me, is the most memorable performance that I've seen. I don't remember the one where the person's leg was the highest. I've probably seen people with high legs on stage, but I don't know those. They don't make me cry. They don't make me feel something. They don't make me feel less alone in the world. They don't make me feel any of those things. It's just like, wow, that's cool that the human body can do that. So if you think it's like, are you too old? Maybe you're too old to be a 14-year-old dancer, because you're not 14 anymore, right? True.
So,
yeah, maybe you're too old to be an 18-year-old Vaganova graduate, because you're not 18 years old anymore, and that age has already passed, right? So yes, you're too old to be young, to be a teenager again. But are they old enough? Are those young dancers old enough to express the way that these dancers expressed it from the piece that I saw? Right? You have to reach a certain age before you can share this type of experience with other people. Nobody at the age of 15 is dancing the piece the way that those people danced. They can't share that. That life experience isn't available to them to share. Like, every age and stage has a different life experience that you're sharing, and the way in which you share it is different. So a 15-year-old is sharing the incredible things that a human body can do, and that's what they have to share at that age, because that's what's available at that age. And when you're 80, what you're sharing is like the deep things about life that we all experience and go through and worry about and think about, and that some have experienced. Like, that's just, to think that you have nothing to offer when you have everything to offer at that age. You have the human experience at that age to offer somebody through dance and through art.
Yeah, I think that's such powerful advice. I mean, I'm feeling emotional just hearing about that performance. I can't imagine, actually being in the room and seeing it, and I think you're so right. It's like, of course, dancers at any age have passion, but when you're an adult specifically, you're dancing, you're really only driven by passion. You're not doing it because you have a parent who's making you go to class, or because you're trying to be well-rounded for scholarships. You're just doing it because you love it. And it's so important not to underestimate the power of that. There's so much power and so much strength in doing that, and it really comes through. So I think you're right. We need to just not beat ourselves up too much about, what our bodies can do, and just kind of focus on why we're dancing.
Yeah, it's such an important thing, and it's such a difficult, nuanced situation, because on the one hand, you can always improve your body, and you can always improve your technique, and you can always get better, right? Like, that's always there for you. And while you're doing that, you already have something you can express and offer, right? They're both there, right? So it's not the argument that adults are like only dancing to express and can't achieve anything, right? It's like, that worry often comes from that you're not going to look like the teenagers look, right? And we discount how much you can actually improve your body at any age, how much you can personally improve your body at any age. And that while you're doing all that, you are very much worth watching and you have something to express and something to share. They're both true. And it's so often boiled down to one or the other, that like either adults are only dancing for the fun of it and they don't want to get better, which I don't think is true, but either it's like boiled down to one or the other, but it's like a much deeper conversation of what's realistically possible for adults, and not discounting how much your body can still change while you're working on it.
Yeah, that's so true. It is both. And I think, so many times we don't realize or think about how much adults are really capable of in ballet.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So much more than we think, because often people think just zero. Like if you have whatever turnout you have now, you can't improve, as if like that's the one thing that won't improve with work.
Right.
Like, but everything else does.
Yeah. So you can work on everything. You can always improve. Yeah, I think that's always so true. And you mentioned earlier that you lived in New York and studied dance in New York for a while. And, so did I. I live an hour outside the city and it's still too far. I miss it every day. You've mentioned that you still feel like a New Yorker at heart too. So I was curious what you love about the city and the dance community there, and also just what that experience taught you about perseverance in dance.
I love New York because everyone there is hustling. Everyone there is trying to do something. I mean, if New York City is such a tough place to live, like you've got to have a pretty tough mindset if you're going to live there. Like no one's really looking out for you. You kind of looking out for yourself. Like it's a weird culture if you haven't experienced it. It's like you're surrounded by people and yet you're paving your own way through it. And everyone else around you is doing the same thing, right? There's very few people who would turn to you in New York City and be like, you're doing too much. Like you're too much. You have too many passions. Like that's not going to happen in that town, that everyone goes there because they're chasing a dream. So I think it has so much of that feeling. I think having left there, I do miss being surrounded by that. Although having cultivated that more in myself, I find that I don't need it as much from the people around me to keep cultivating it within myself. But as a late teenager, I really craved that environment where I wasn't the only one with wanting big things in my life. I wasn't the only one trying to go after something and trying to, make something great. I didn't even know what it was going to be. I'm so curious and want to work on so many things and want to do so many things. And, in high school, you're like pretty lame when that's your MO. So I was just very happy to go somewhere where everybody seemed to share the energy and the intensity of it. Taking dance class in New York, you definitely have to persevere, right? Like you walk in and everybody there knows what they're doing. Sometimes there's principals warming up for their show using your beginner class. And, you just have to keep going. You just have to keep going and figuring things out and looking stupid and getting run into by people and dealing with some dirty looks here and there and missing the count of 8 on the phrase in your group because you don't know how to count yet. Like you just keep going and keep messing up for a very long time is what I learned from dance class in New York City. Is like you just keep going and you just keep guessing the steps until you figure out what's going on, and you take it home and you practice it and you take it to the studio by yourself and you practice it and you take private lessons when you can to get help on the things that you need help with. And you just really drive your own ballet journey. Like there's nobody there to spoon feed ballet to you. There's nobody there to be like, okay, now this is the next thing and this is the next thing. Like you really have to take initiative and be like, I want to turn. I'm going to go figure out what it takes to turn. Like I want to figure out this Grand Allegro stuff. So I'm going to go figure out what it takes to get into the next level class. It's very much like teaches you to take charge of your own process and not just like wait for somebody to like invite you to the next thing. Like you show up and you're like, I'm here and I will suck for a while. So please enjoy this display of suckage until I figure out what's going on. I think, and in New York's a great place for that, because even if people roll their eyes at you, they're rolling their eyes at you in the subway anyway. So it's a normal experience.
Exactly. And I think that's such underrated advice. I heard on another podcast, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but one of the guests was saying, don't be afraid to suck at something new for a while. And I think that's so important to just keep with it. I walked into a ballet class a couple of days ago and it was full of 16-year-old trainees. And I was like, this is their warm up. And I'm like dying to
Right.
class. But it's so important to just keep going and not compare yourself because it's your own journey. And I know you also talked earlier about your time in New York and studying with Beth Kurtz. It sounds like she was a great mentor and teacher to you. So I was curious if you had anything else to add about what she taught you and how that still informs your teaching now.
She was big on experimenting. She was really big on experimenting, and that very much informs my teaching now. So if something is not working, try the opposite. If you cannot land your turns in the back, try landing them to the side. If you cannot get something to work, like experiment, try different stuff, push your hip too far to the side, push it too far back, push it too far forward, like try and move your body in different ways. And she was all about experimenting. So we would have an exercise, and then if it's not working, just try things, try different things, try different approaches, try to squeeze different muscles, try to think about different things, and try to get really creative about how you get this stuff to work in your body. Because with the technical stuff, like every person's body has its own hidden secret user's manual that it's your job to uncover. Like nobody's body comes with the same user manual as anybody else's body. And it's also not written anywhere. You have to explore and figure it out yourself. Nobody has your user's manual for your body. Only you have it. And it's inside of your body. And you have to just seek and look and explore. And so she definitely instilled that in me from the very beginning. And while at the time I wasn't as open to experimenting as I am now, because at the time I was much younger and less experienced with all of it, and wasn't as okay with looking silly and doing things wrong as I have grown to be. But the idea still stuck. And certainly once she started teaching me how to teach people, the idea stuck much more because I could see it applied on other people and see how helpful it was and see how it really helped them achieve their goals. And so then it helped me feel more safe to experiment on myself because I could really see in other people how helpful it was to guide them with little, I forget what she called them, mini experiments. She had a cooler name for it. I'll have to go back in her notes, in my notes from her and find her name, but it was like a mini experiment, something along those lines.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, she sounds like an incredible teacher. And from what I've heard from your students, you are as well. So it sounds like that gift has been passed on. And I want to talk a little bit about the International Adult Ballet Festival because you brought it up earlier. I think this is such a cool thing. You started it in Miami a few years ago, and it's a chance for adult ballet dancers to take classes, perform, compete. They get to do a photo shoot, all these things that we typically don't have much access to as adult dancers who aren't pro. And it just finished its third year this summer, and now you're getting ready for 2024. So I was curious how you got the idea for something like that and why it's so important to you.
When I closed my Denver studios and moved everything online, I was having a great time with everybody. But what I was really missing, and one of my favorite parts of dance, is performing. I mean, it's such a great and fun part of it. When I had the Denver studios, we had a recital. We did a studio recital, and then we were getting ready for our next studio recital when COVID happened. So that recital obviously didn't happen. So in my mind, there was still like a pending recital, and I was feeling like there was just such a great missing piece in all of the dancers who I was teaching and all of their ballet journeys, because some of them use my classes to practice between classes. Like if they're in a pretty overwhelming studio environment, like New York City, for example, where nothing is really broken down in a big open class, they're maybe coming to my classes between classes to kind of figure out what the heck is going on and reach those goals that maybe you don't spend so much time working on in a kind of chaotic open class environment. And some people come to my classes because they don't have access to adult classes locally either. Like the studio only has kids, or they live somewhere remote that there aren't classes. So in either scenario, those people who come to me without like adult focused studios who feel like they're really getting good training, they often don't have any performance opportunities either. So I'm thinking like, okay, how am I going to get these people the chance to perform, right? Like I can't call all their studios and get their studios to let them in to a performance, like what am I going to do to get them to perform? So then I'm like, well, maybe they could all like fly to Miami and we could put on a show together and, have some fun. And maybe I can bring in some other great teachers, and just sort of started designing what I would want if I was going to fly somewhere and be in a show and be in a, thinking about my ideal like ballet vacation. Then I just started snowballing from there and put the idea out there, and then they came and they flew here and we put on a show and we had a great time and they all wanted to come back again. So I did it again. And it just, it kind of kept going. And it was just a really big component that I felt like was missing. And I'll say with the performance aspect too, another part that's often missing is like adults are often given the chance to play like the parent in the Nutcrackers, in the party scene in the Nutcracker, or they're, sometimes in a group dance, but they don't often get the chance to like pick their own solo, right? Which is like something that kids get to do at YAGP or like in different performance opportunities. They're like picking their own rep, or they're doing rep from their teacher. Whereas adults, when they're often in like a small recital, they're doing what their teacher assigned them, or they're in a group dance, or they're like the adult in a group of kids. And so I really wanted to give them the chance to like do that, pick their own piece, choreograph their own piece, choose their own ballet costume, like do Ramonda, do, Giselle, do the classical rep that sometimes they won't get the opportunity to do because it will be given to the kids or the youth who need that experience on their resume for their career, right? So I wanted adults to have that option to choose their own piece, not just to be in somebody else's recital, but to like drive their own show, drive their own piece and bring it to the performance. So that was a big aspect of it for me, was that I didn't come with like a prepared show. I gave them the chance to dance in a couple of group pieces that I choreograph and we put together over Zoom before the festival. Then we, stage it once we're there. But like, it was really important to me that they get the chance to have artistic freedom to create what they want to create on the stage.
I love that so much. I love how you described it as a ballet vacation. It literally sounds like a dream. So that's awesome. And I know that you mentioned in the video recap on your website from this past year that you were moved to tears seeing everyone on stage at the performance at the end of the festival. So what's it been like seeing it grow over the past few years you've been doing it, and just the entire Broche Ballet community grow? This is something that started with your own ballet dream and now has expanded to supporting the ballet dreams of all of these other dancers.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's almost hard to believe, where it is, because so much of it is just like chasing, just me trying to make what I wanted when I was younger, and like almost trying to satisfy like that deep need that I had when I was in my early 20s to feel like a dancer and to be a dancer and to really get deep and immersive into it. I wanted teachers who pushed me in a supportive way. I wanted performance opportunities. I wanted ballet friends. I wanted to like have a community to immerse in. And so it's sometimes I have to deliberately kind of look back and reflect on what it's become and where it's grown to, because it's sometimes difficult to believe. You're just going step by step. It's like watching a kid grow up. You don't see them getting taller, but then you look back and it's like, wow, you're tall. So it's kind of like that, where it's like every day I just show up and do the emails and do the attendance and do the on-demand videos and, answer the things and plan this and plan that, and little by little. And every day is just a tiny step. So sometimes it's hard to remember that like your tiny steps add up to massive things, right? Your tiny steps every single day that look like nothing. When you look back, it's like, wow, wow, that's cool. Like, that's a really cool thing. So yeah, it's like, I almost never bother to take the time reflecting on it, except for in environments like this on a podcast or something where people ask that. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. There's sometimes you get so heads down, I forget to come up and remember just like how amazing it is to be a part of such a great thing, and to be a part of something that's like now, bigger than me. It's not even about me anymore. It's not about me at all. It's about the people in the community. It's about how much it means to them. It's about how it changes them in their career. It's about how it changes their relationships, about how it inspires their kids. It's about how it inspires their coworkers and their community. It's about them. It's like now it's just like a big ball that I'm over here, like, molding and hurting to what I can imagine next. So it's a very surreal experience in a way, because the day-to-day tasks look almost nothing like what it is on the whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And, I think it is tough when you're in the day-to-day of it to kind of look up, but I'll just look up for you and say that you're doing such incredible work for this community and with this community. It's really inspiring.
Thank
and,
you.
All those baby steps do add up. And, speaking of tiny steps or tiny jumps, we have a Petit Allegro section on the podcast where
fun.
I just ask you a bunch of fun, quick questions about ballet. curious, I know you mentioned going into your first ballet class, not really knowing what to wear or how to dress. So what's the go-to item now in your ballet bag that you have to have at every class or rehearsal?
Earrings.
Oh, interesting.
Unexpected reply.
Oh, that's great. You want to feel like put together and sparkly. So I totally get
Yeah, exactly. And like ballet leotards never have enough sparkle. Like I don't understand why we don't have that. But anyways, I've bedazzled my own. But when I don't have a bedazzled one on, I always like to make sure that I have some earrings to shine up the occasion.
I love that. That's awesome. And then do you have a favorite ballet or a variation from a ballet that you love?
My favorite ballet is definitely Giselle. I love Giselle. I love the drama of it. I love the second act. I love how spooky Myrta is, and she's so intense. And I love how cute Giselle is in the beginning. And it's just like such a great combination of like cute and creepy. Yeah, it's a guilty pleasure of mine.
It is. It's
Rewatching Giselle, especially the second act.
Yeah, yes. It's so beautifully done that you forget how creepy it is at the end. You're kind of like, wow, this is kind of dark.
Yeah, you're like, wait, they killed him. Okay, all right. I mean, fine.
And you mentioned on your podcast, Broche Banter, that you've done powerlifting as well, which is awesome. Are there any other sports outside of ballet or even other styles of dance that you'd love to try but haven't yet?
Well, I've done pole dancing for about a year and a half, and that was super, super fun. Amazing for the upper body. So good and so fun. My heels for the class were obviously giant pink sparkly heels. Yeah. Also, I took up jujitsu a year and a half ago, which has been just totally fun and a whole different way to move my body. I think that's been super fun. I know next on my list is, I don't even want to say this out loud because probably someone's going to hold me to it in some years' time, right? That's like, because our community is all about accountability and helping people push past fear. So I don't even want to put this out there because someone's going to come at me in some years and be like, did you do it? And I'll be like, oh. But anyways, my next is probably something like rock climbing because I am dead scared of heights and I want to get over that fear and I want to face that. So I know something like that will come in the future. I don't want it to, but it will. I know it will at some point. It's there. I hate lingering fears. I hate them sitting there nagging me. It's going to have to get crushed at some point.
All right. Well, this podcast, if it's still around in a couple of years, we'll check back in with you.
I won't have done it. Okay.
No, that's awesome. Well, you're all about conquering fears and challenges head on. So I have no doubt that if you do it, you'll be amazing. And then I was also curious if you have, a pre-class routine. Do you have a particular snack or stretches that you do or any music you listen to or anything?
That's a great question. Snack, definitely always. My favorite is like super full fat yogurt with banana and maybe some berries. That's like totally my favorite. Light enough where I can hold it up, and then powerful enough where I get a little bit of everything in there. That's my favorite pre-class snack. And electrolytes, hugely important for me before class, especially in Miami. So humid. You get a real good sweat on. Pre-class stretches, I guess it really just depends on what I was doing the day before. I'm like a huge massage gun gal, so I get my dance buddy out and just go at all my old injury spots, like my shoulder, the ankle, like behind the ankle, the little calves, get all those the low back. I've had an injury there. I go after all the little areas before I start class. That's usually what I find to be the most effective.
Yeah, those are so nice, those Theraguns. They really help.
Yeah. So good.
That's great. Awesome. And then I know that you've traveled a lot. Is there a city that you would love to travel to and dance in that you haven't yet?
The biggest city is New York. I want to go back and dance again there. That's the one that overwhelms my mind.
Yeah. So when you come back, hit me up. I would love to see you in person. That's great. And then my last question is just, in a perfect world, what would ballet look like, or what would you want it to be?
I would want ballet to be what I've seen jujitsu to be. And I find this to be the most optimistic and hopeful thing because jujitsu used to be like ballet is now, where it was very closed, very exclusive, kid only. It was very much like weeding people out. It had a lot of the things that ballet is changing, but, has had in the past historically. And now, it's been just totally busted wide open where there's a jujitsu place in every neighborhood and every town with thriving adult communities. There's adult competition. There's adult festivals like what I have. There's adult camps. There's like so many that if anyone wants to be a part of it, they can, and they're welcome, and they're going to suck at it because everyone does when they start, and they're welcomed through that. And that's part of the process. And it's recognized that the sucking in the beginning is part of the training. It's recognized that that is a huge benefit for adults, and for adults to get out of their comfort zone and to push through something difficult, and, to be a part of a community of people who are pushing themselves through difficult things. I want it to be that type of community where it's just like recognized as normal for the adults to be doing it as for the kids, and that you have just incredible opportunities to fit it into your life and be a part of a very strong and thriving community of people who are encouraging each other to be better and keep growing and keep fighting their fears, and keep being better in however they personally define that to be for them. I think that huge community support is such a big piece of it, because everyone who's pursuing ballet as a passion in adulthood is facing challenges doing it. Every single person is facing aches and pains or difficulties learning in whichever thing. Some people find footwork harder to learn. Some people find the arms or the legs. Everyone is dealing with how hard the sport is. Everyone is dealing with how hard dance is. Everyone is dealing with that. And so to help each other through that and say, like, yeah, we deal with hard things together. That's what we do in this community. That's what this community is about. That's what we're doing here as a part of this, not just like me versus them or small pockets of opportunities there, or like, I'm so lucky that this is in my town. Wouldn't want to hear those things anymore. It would be like a big community of people who want to be a part of this great art form and who want to drive it and drive each other and push the limits of it in their own way. So that's where I would love to see all of it go and be, and what it would all look like.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel hopeful that ballet is continuing to inch in that direction. And I think because of people like you and the work that you're doing, you're helping make those changes. So I'm really grateful for that. And could you just let people know where they can find you, on Instagram or social media, or maybe your website?
Yeah, definitely. You can find me on Instagram. I'm mostly sharing at Julie the Ballerina. Sorry, there's a little bit of noise here in the background. I'm mostly sharing at Julie the Ballerina and at Broche Ballet on Instagram. The Adult Ballet Festival has a handle too, at IABF Adult Ballet Festival. And my website, brocheballet.com, or iabf.dance for the festival. And I would love to see you there, whether on YouTube, social media, in my online classes, in Miami. Let's do it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. And we'll link to all of that in the podcast description as well, so people can easily find it there. And I know you mentioned at the beginning you have a couple of projects coming up. I don't know if you're ready to announce them yet. This episode comes out in November, but if there's anything you want to plug for the listeners.
In November, yes. I believe that by November, Broche Magazine will have launched, which is a printed glossy magazine featuring adult ballet dancers and stories of adult ballet dancers who are pursuing ballet in adulthood. We take all the beautiful photo shoots, the professional photo shoots of our adult ballet dancers, and write stories about them and articles and motivational bits, so that people can really hold ballet in their hands, keep it on their coffee table, and have ballet be an even bigger part of their life. So if it's launched already, brochemagazine.com, you can pick up a Broche t-shirt, tote bag, and the Broche magazine.
Oh my gosh. Well, you have just made me so excited, because I'm a magazine journalist. So I literally can't wait to hold that in my hands. I'm definitely going to subscribe. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Yay.
That's really exciting. And it's been so great to talk to you, Julie. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this interview with me. I've learned so much from you.
Of course, I'm really happy that you brought me on, and I'm really excited to hear from everybody on the episode. And don't tell me about rock climbing in a few years. And I hope you get in the ballet studio.
I hope so too. And we'll definitely be checking in about rock climbing.
Yeah. We go face those fears.
Yeah, exactly. I think Julie will eventually try out rock climbing, because she's such a good example of someone who's willing to face her fears and not let them stop her. I was so inspired by our conversation, and equally inspired by all of the listeners who pointed me in her direction. So thank you. There's a question box below each episode of the Adult Ballet Studio on Spotify that says who should join the studio next. If you've suggested someone already, thank you, and I'm on it. And if not, let me know who you want to hear from. I want to be bringing you conversations just like this that you're interested in. Julie mentioned Broche Ballet is launching a magazine, and that the 2024 International Adult Ballet Festival is in the works. I'll include a link to both of those, as well as brocheballetonline.com and Julie's Instagram, in the podcast description in case you want more info or want to connect with her. You can also find me on Instagram at eblosfield, or send the podcast an email at theadultballetstudio@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And as always, if you like what you hear, please follow and give the podcast a rating or a review. It helps us out so much. Next month will be the Adult Ballet Studio's last episode for 2023. Don't worry, we'll be back in January of 2024 after the holidays. But this next episode is also a really good one. I can't wait for you to hear from the next guest as we talk about dismantling racial stereotypes in ballet and making it more welcoming for all. We're entering Nutcracker season, so we talk about that too. Don't miss that episode with another special guest on December 5th. And in the meantime, happy dancing and see you at the bar.